I was 30 when I stepped off the red-eye into London fog. A suitcase in one hand, a folder of documents in the other, and a heart I was trying to convince back into hope. Robert's text arrived as the wheels touched the runway. "Welcome home, love." I'm right outside home. After 3 hard years in Chicago, first widowed, then working 2 jobs that smelled of coffee and bleach, I wanted to believe that word again. Robert was tall in the way doorframes notice. Navy coat, clean-shaven jaw. That easy British smile that makes apologies sound like compliments. When he pulled me close, the world smelled like winter, aftershave, and new beginnings. We met one summer night on a rooftop party. He was visiting Chicago for work and drifted toward me when talk turned to books and old cities. For once, I didn't shrink my story. I said widow, and he didn't flinch. He touched the rim of my glass and said, "Then you've already met the worst of it. The rest should be kinder." Kindness became our currency. Texts, video calls, simple meals over a phone balanced on a mug. He had a 9-year-old son, Theo, who loved dinosaurs and hard questions. He'd say things like, "He'd love you, you know." You have the same way of explaining the world like it's still worth saving. When he proposed at O'Hare before a flight, people clapped. The ring wasn't big, but it sat right, like something that already knew my finger. I told myself I was allowed to try again. At Heathrow, Robert took my suitcase in one hand and my future in the other. "Tea first," he said. "You can't do anything in this country before tea." The flat in Clapham had high windows and a stubborn radiator. I loved it immediately. A plant on the sill, drawers cleared for me, a hook for my coat. That first night, we split a grocery store cake at the tiny table and practiced saying "we." There were red flags I decided were festive. The deck of cards in his bag. Fine, he played with friends. The betting app on his phone. He said it was like fantasy football. Dinner out on a Tuesday, a bottle of wine, him slipping the card to the waiter with a flourish. "You deserve a bit of spoiling," he said. I'd been starved of spoiling. I didn't ask what was on the bill. That night, I fell asleep with a ring on my hand and a sentence in my chest. This time will be different. We built a routine quickly. Paper lists on the fridge, shared calendars, mornings that smelled like toast. Theo would pad into the kitchen in dinosaur pajamas and ask if America really had pink snow. I told him it was sunrise on the drifts, and he nodded like I'd told him a spell. Robert worked in property maintenance. "Not glamorous," he said, "but I can fix anything." The first time I saw a betting slip on the hall table, I picked it up like it might stain. He kissed my temple. "Just a flutter, Isla. A $5 on Chelsea. Everyone does it. Everyone doesn't hide receipts under the fruit bowl," I thought. But the week he brought home a second-hand desk for my writing, I told myself, marriage is a long conversation. You don't hang up after the first misunderstanding. When he lost, he joked. When he won, he took us out. Wins have a way of being louder than losses. Gamblers live on volume. I learned the sound of his keys when he came home later than late. Which footsteps meant happy Robert. Which meant argument. Small things slipped from the calendar. His promise to meet the school head, the Sunday market, the hour for bank papers. Work ran over. Traffic. Card declined? That machine's always fussy. We opened a joint account because that's what married people do. He said he'd show me the login later. Later kept moving. Friday nights, his friends came by with takeaway boxes and stories. When I refilled the chip bowl, one said too loudly, "Robert's luck'll turn. It always does." I smiled from the kitchen, because I know how to host, even when I'm hosting dread. That night I went to bed first. He came in smelling of whiskey and rain. When he slipped under the blanket, he whispered, "You worry too much, love." Maybe I did. But somewhere under that whisper, a secret started to grow. And I didn't know yet how much it would cost me. Once, I came home to find him asleep on the couch, the TV humming a betting ad. Bet smart, bet small, bet now. The irony was almost poetic. I watched him sleep and wondered how many women had mistaken exhaustion for devotion. On Sundays, I'd walk to the market alone. He'd always promised to join, but something, just one more call, just 5 more minutes, always kept him home. The fruit seller started recognizing me. "No husband today?" he'd ask. I smiled. He's working. I don't know which of us I was trying to convince. The first real alarm wore a nice dress. We were at a birthday dinner. String lights, laughter, candles trembling in wine glasses. The server whispered to him. His face flushed. He laughed too loud. "Try it again," he said. I paid, quietly, my card. Because shame, I learned, has an accent. It whispers, American. That night, we fought with the politeness of people still pretending. "You're overreacting. You're under-listening." The next morning, he made tea. Tea fixes nothing, but he kept offering it like it might. That's when I began my ledger. Nothing dramatic, just dates, amounts, what I saw, what he said. I learned his tells, how his right eye twitched when lying, how he'd say, "babe," more often when hiding something. The betting app changed icons, disguising itself as a weather app. Gamblers are clever until they're not. Theo once asked me why Daddy always looked tired. I told him grown-ups sometimes dream with their eyes open. He drew me a picture of 3 stick figures, me, him, and his father, with a bright yellow sun above. I tucked it in my journal beside the receipts. Hope can coexist with evidence. I'm living proof. Then the letters began. Small white envelopes with red print. I'd stack them neatly on the console, like waiting might change the words inside. Robert would toss them unopened into a drawer. "Junk mail," he'd say. Junk mail doesn't have your name in bold. Secrets are lonely creatures. They leave breadcrumbs even when they want to starve you. The breadcrumb trail led to a woman's voice on our landline, older than me by the gravity in it. "Is Robert there?" "He's at work," I said, because lying to strangers is easier than lying to yourself. "Would you tell him?" Paula called. He knows which Paula. Her words held more winter than the weather. I didn't scream or accuse. That's not the kind of ending I wanted to buy. I became polite, precise, documented. I took pictures of his betting slips, screen recorded the balances, printed the overdue council tax notice. I spoke to the landlord and learned the numbers behind his composed handwriting. I opened my own account and had my freelance payments rerouted. I called my bank in Chicago and asked boring questions about credit limits and transfers. Boring questions are building materials. Ask enough, and you can build a door, even in a wall. I found Paula on Facebook. She had smiling pictures with a little dog, and a caption 2 months ago that said, "New starts can still be honest." People write the truth accidentally all the time. When I called, I kept my voice the temperature of tea you can still drink. "I don't know what you and my husband are to each other," I said. "But I do know about the accounts. She exhaled an entire year. "He owes me £6,400, she said flatly. He said he'd pay it last month when he had a win. He also said he'd left his wife. That must be you." "That used to be me," I said, and put my hand on the desk like I was steadying the city. I didn't want to destroy Robert. I wanted to stop subsidizing him. There's a difference that doesn't trend on social media but fixes actual lives. Here is what I did, and you can copy it if you ever need to. New phone and email for accounts. Separate savings under my name only. Photocopies of passports, visas, and marriage certificates scanned to cloud. Letter to the landlord stating I would no longer be responsible for Robert's portion after a date certain, with proof of my payment. Appointment with Citizens Advice, free, to understand tenant rights and how to disengage legally. Contacted the school privately to update pickup permissions for Theo so that my absence wouldn't leave him stranded. The last part hurt. I loved that boy's dinosaur questions. But loving children sometimes means not letting them watch the worst of us. The secret that cost me everything wasn't that he gambled or that Paula existed. It was how much of myself I had already sold trying to make him a better man at my price. I was overdrafting me. So I made a plan that didn't rely on his change. Plans that require other people's conversions are just prayers in fancier outfits. I spent a week preparing my exit like a heist, because leaving someone like Robert requires precision. I rented a P.O. box. I changed passwords. I emailed my Chicago landlord for a reference. I found a small studio near Battersea with a skylight and no ghosts. I spoke to the school privately about Theo's pickup schedule. Every night, I cooked something simple for dinner, smiled at his stories, and waited for the right day. He was cheerful again, because liars often glow right before collapse. Calm revenge is mostly paperwork and timing. On a Monday morning, I dressed like errands. I took the joint account statements, my ledger, the photographs of slips, the council tax notice, and my letter to the landlord. I walked to the bank and asked to speak to a manager in a room that had carpet quiet enough to hear your own courage. "I'm here to stop funding a gambling problem," I said. "I need to remove my direct deposits from this joint account immediately, and I'm placing a written record of unauthorized transfers. I'm not reporting fraud. I'm reporting consent withdrawn from this date." Banks like clear sentences. They stamped things. I left with paper heavy enough to anchor me. I scheduled a final rent payment for my half and attached the letter to the landlord with dates and signatures. I printed 2 copies, one for him, one for me. I changed the Wi-Fi password. You can be married and still own your internet, it turns out. I packed 2 suitcases, clothes, documents, the photograph of my first wedding, where Joy looked surprised to be there. That evening, Robert came home golden and tall, the kind of handsome that looks like it has a plan. He kissed the air near me and said he'd sorted everything. He used the word sorted like a broom. I smiled properly, because smiling is sometimes camouflage. "Dinner?" I asked. "Let me order in." He turned on the match and shouted happily for people I've never met. At halftime, I stood in the doorway and said like I was reading a weather report, "I've closed access to the joint account for my deposits. Here's a copy of the letter to the landlord confirming my half is paid through the end of the month. Here are records of the transfers to your personal accounts and evidence of betting. I've notified the council regarding my liability. I'll be moving out on Friday." He laughed because the first stage of panic is theater. Then he said it, what men like him always eventually say. "You can't do that." I nodded toward the paper. "I already did. He knocked a glass over. Tall men hate being made small by documents. He said things about immigration and how I wouldn't last here without him. I reminded him my visa had my name on it, and so did my work. I told him I'd be sending a courtesy note to Paula with a copy of the payment plan he had texted her. I had it, and that she should speak to small claims with both our names if she liked. I wasn't protecting him from consequences anymore. That was my revenge. Letting reality happen to him. On Friday, I waited for him to leave for work, and because he did not actually fix things for a living, he left late. I took my 2 suitcases down 3 flights and into a cab. I left a note on the kitchen table, and because I am kinder than I was treated, it did not insult him. It said, "I loved you as hard as I could without abandoning myself. I will not finance your habits or your fantasies. Do not contact me unless it concerns paperwork. Isla." I moved into a studio that smelled like new paint and possibility. The bed was close enough to the stove that I could flip pancakes without fully standing, and I have never been happier about poor interior design. Calm revenge is the moment you realize you don't want them broken. You want them irrelevant. He tried every trick first. "We can fix it. You're overreacting. You'll never find someone who understands you like I do." He said the last part like it was a warning, and it landed in me as a promise. I will never again ask to be understood by someone who won't even read the instructions. Paula messaged to say she'd filed the claim. Robert sent 3 frantic texts about how I'd ruined his credit and his life. I sent a single reply with the Citizens Advice link, and that line again: "Do not contact me unless it concerns paperwork." The landlord acknowledged my letter, noted Robert's arrears, and copied me when he started proceedings. The bank flagged several late-night withdrawals as the problem he'd promised they weren't. His mates stopped coming around. Gamblers are loudest when they're winning, and invisible when they're not. For weeks, I flinched at doorbells. Then, one morning, the postman handed me a parcel. No name, no sender. Inside, a new drawing. 3 stick figures again, but this time the sun had sunglasses, and beneath it, in shaky letters, "Miss you." No note, just that. I sat on the floor and cried, not because I missed Robert, but because someone small had loved me without agenda. One afternoon, when the sun turned the studio walls the color of toast, I went for a walk along the Thames and said the most important sentence of my 30s. I did not fail at love. I succeeded at leaving. If you're listening because you've Googled how to leave a gambler at 2 a.m., here is the only advice I own with my whole chest. Don't argue with the odds. Change the game. Move the money. Move your body. Move your future. Do not move your boundary. Robert got what he deserved, and so did I. He got a relationship with consequences. I got peace. People ask if the secret he hid cost me everything. It did, for a while. Money, sleep, the soft belly of trust. But secrets only stay expensive if you keep paying. The last payment is the moment you say no more, and you mean it like a signature. I still drink tea first thing because some habits from that life were worth keeping. I write at the second-hand desk he carried up the stairs. It's mine now, in all the ways that count. On Sundays, I buy myself a grocery store cake and split it into 2 plates. One for the woman I was, who kept believing there was a better version of him hiding in the next promise. And one for the woman I am, who finally believed there was a better version of me hiding in the next choice. Thank you for listening. If your life looks anything like mine did, I hope you choose the kind of revenge that lets you sleep. That night, before turning off the lights, I wrote one last line in my notebook. Sometimes, life doesn't give you closure. It gives you clarity. And maybe that's enough, because love, loss, and forgiveness, they all live quietly inside ordinary people. People like you. People like me. Does this story resonate with you? Have you ever held on too long? Or learned to let go too late? Tell me, what would you have done if you were in Isla's place? And if you like stories about ordinary people, real emotions, and second chances, make sure to follow for more, because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that could be yours.